Okay, so I noticed in my article was about sibling bullying. Like Eric always bullies Paul, but why don't you think Paul? Why do you think Paul doesn't stand up to Eric and to tell his parents what Eric does?
I think that Paul does not stand up to Eric or tell his parents because of two reasons. One, he fears that Eric is going to hurt him, and two, his parents may not believe him, and they may just shrug it off at, like, as in near the beginning of the book, whenever it was talking about whenever he was being chased by that one car, he thought it was Eric. They could like blame it on his eyes or something like that.
Yeah, but Eric was right
We
there.
don't really know if it was Eric or not, like, because he thought it was Eric, but it didn't actually say if it was Eric or not, if it was someone else.
But it probably was Eric because Eric's been violent. He has proven that he doesn't like Paul, and it's been proven that the parents will believe everything that Eric says and won't believe Paul. So it's a good point that both of you made.
Is there a motive for his sibling rivalry between him and Paul? Because is there really a reason why Eric apparently hates Paul so much? Because, I mean, sibling rivalry, it has to come from somewhere, because you can't just all of a sudden hate each other. You have to either there could be competition between one another, trying to get better grades or do better in school, or in this case, Eric wants to be the most popular in his family and in the community, and Paul feels a little bit left in his shadow. So there's a motive there, but not exactly. That would be more of a motive for Paul to hate Eric. So why would Eric hate Paul is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I know something that happened to me when my brother was born. Like, I did not want a new brother because I was the center of attention in my family. So I feel like Eric, he wants the Eric Fisher football dream. He wants all of the attention on him. So he does everything he can to do Paul to,
So maybe
keep
like,
him in the shadows.
like he feels threatened.
Yeah.
Or
And who had the article about the sibling? Sorry, Anna, I don't mean to cut you off, but who can speak to that? Who had that article about the sibling bullying? You guys speak to that a little bit.
In the article, it talked a lot about how children who were yelled at or hit by their parents were a lot more likely to do the same thing to their younger siblings. But in the book, it doesn't really show signs of Eric being yelled at or hit by his parents, because parents basically adore him, and he's basically the favorite child.
But one thing I do notice is that the parents seem to have hostility toward each other, right?
Yeah,
like Mr. and Mrs. Fisher aren't exactly the lovebirds.
Paul's mom is mostly towards Paul, while their dad is mostly towards Eric, and that's like creating a rift in their family. Because if, like, say if something happens to Eric, then their dad's gonna be mad, but if something happens to Paul, he's not gonna be as mad. Like, if something were to happen that were bad, he wouldn't be as mad or as sad as it would happen to if it would happen to Eric.
I think that Eric is bullying Paul because Paul seems like he's pretty good at sports, and as I recall, Eric, before he started playing football, he played soccer. Paul may have been better than Eric at soccer, so maybe Eric tried to hurt Paul for being better at him than the sport he had been playing.
I think the entire sibling rivalry is more of an attention issue, because being the oldest, I can say it really, really annoys me. My younger siblings get more attention than me, because I'm like, I was here first. And that's what I think is happening. I think that Paul did something to get attention once, and Eric didn't like that. Just constantly trying to make him not look good, not get noticed by his parents as much, and with Paul not getting noticed by his parents, they start to focus on Eric and develop an entire plan for him, because they know that he's the one doing stuff that Paul can't, because Eric is not letting him do that.
I think that Eric think the reason Eric bullies Paul might have something to do with when Eric had his eyes messed up by the eclipse. If, Eric might have done something to Paul, or something happened to Paul that made his parents take away their attention from Eric for a while.
That's what I was thinking, because I'm thinking that he got more attention from, because he was the baby, and because, like, kind of like Bryant said, like, the smaller ones get more attention because they need more help and stuff. So I'm thinking that maybe Eric didn't like that, so he bullies Paul and puts him down to make him seem better and to make his parents like root for him more.
You guys are making good inferences in Tangerine, but let's go back to that article. What kind of kids become sibling bullies? Like, what are those statistics say? Like, what do those bullies look like? The sibling bullies.
I think that normally, like, I mean, in every family, there's always some, like, children rivalry. But I think some are really when, like, if you have a younger sibling, or if the parents are at work constantly, or their parents are constantly, like, making bills and they just have no time for their children. So they draw attention by doing something negative, like hurting their younger sibling or something like that. And I think it's really a lot of attention is what they want. They want to feel cared for by their parents, but they don't like it if their parents, like, they seem to make a favorite out of their younger sibling, and the older is just like, well, you know, I really want some attention here. So I think, and a lot of the comments, because this was a lot of comments on here, and it talks about how, like, their siblings would, like, still bully them at age 40 and stuff. And I think it also, it starts with, because a lot of the people who get bullied are normally the younger and middle ones, and it really is because the older people feel more superior because they're older, but they don't, when their parents give more attention to the smaller ones, they don't feel superior anymore, and they need a way to express that. So.
I have a story to contribute to that my dad told me. When he was the younger child in the family, and my Uncle Greg, who's the middle child, he would bully him, and one time they just went at it and started punching and hitting each other, and that was when my dad kind of said, "That's it, I'm fed up with it," and he threw him through a window.
Oh
What was the result?
That's not the answer.
That story. What was the moral of that
I
story?
guess what you guys are kind of agreeing on is that there's always kind of like an alpha dog in the family, and it's usually the older person. And so just like in Tangerine, Eric is bullying his little brother.
And one thing that I noticed from the comments, sorry Patrick, one thing I noticed from the comments from that article was that a lot of those bullies were older siblings, and the parents knew about it. Like, the parents knew that was happening, but they couldn't stand up to them because they were older, male, athletic kids that were becoming bullies.
About that, actually, when my dad was a kid, his parents knew that him and his brother were fighting, but instead of stopping it, they just nicknamed them Tom and Jerry because they just kept fighting. And on the another topic about the car incident where Paul thought Eric was trying to kill him, I thought it was interesting that then they talked about how Eric had never shown any signs of wanting to drive, so it was kind of like keeping up with the lie and never like acting like he would have been the one to drive because he never actually wanted to drive.
In some cases, what I'm supposed to say is that it's mostly like older athletic males. My dad, like, he has a brother. They're like really mean to each other when they're little, and I don't think his brother, like, I don't think he was that athletic. My dad was like very athletic and was younger than him. So I just remember that he said like that sometimes like to not get to not get into like a scuffle with him. He would just like hide in the bathroom, like lock the door because he can't unlock the door from the outside. Like, well, I think then it was like they couldn't unlock it. So yeah.
I
So
think
it's like it's almost like it could happen like to anyone. And like my original question was like, what was the moral that story that was telling?
Well, he was just kind of trying to tell me about how It relates to the athletic part because my dad is more athletic than my uncle by the long run. And so I don't know.
I want to make sure that we hit on the gated communities because when I was walking around yesterday, when you guys were talking, one thing that I noticed was that you did not take it the way I thought you guys were going to take it. Like, you did not buy this article. So I want you guys definitely to talk about that. If you had the white article, what about gated communities? Please explain it to everybody else, and then make the connection to Tangerine.
It said in the gated communities that they would be excluding themselves from the world, and they felt safer in there. But it showed no evidence of why it would be bad. Like it stated stuff, but it never said any evidence or statistics about why that would be bad.
Okay, so it was like a fault in the writing. Like
Yeah.
you didn't. Okay. So it was a weak
The
argument.
article basically, like I had this article, and it was basically talking about all the problems with having a gated community. And I actually disagreed with the article, but connecting to Tangerine, I was wondering how Paul's life would be different if he didn't live in a gated community. Would he relate more to the kids that he goes to school with now at Tangerine Middle, or
That kind of connects to my article too, because my article was about like wealth and like race, and I know like gated communities normally like have more expensive homes and then they said it's like Tangerine is like kind of almost the exact opposite of like Windsor Middle School. Like Windsor Middle School is more like wealthier people, and then at Tangerine you have like all these big gangs and stuff like that, and then like it just wasn't treated the same with gated communities as it was in some other place, like, so it's kind of different there.
One thing that I was confused about whenever we were reading Tangerine was how Lake Windsor Middle School had all the portables, even though they could probably, if they, based on what you guys were saying, like how gated communities have more wealthy families, they could the Lake Windsor Middle School, it would get more money if it was reaching out just to the gated communities. They would have more money to spend for their child, and I'm thinking that they would probably they could have built a main school for all the grades and have a lot of money left over, and not just the portables that would have caused could have been that were second to the sinkhole, but at Tangerine they have a 3-story building for their.
It said how the portables were rather new. Well, not like old, but not new, but they were still in good condition. It was just the walkways that were old. And then it said about Tangerine how the building was older, not like new.
Yeah,
It was just
but
3 stories, but it was still old.
I was just wondering why Lake Windsor Middle School didn't try to replace the portables, because if they did, then there would be less a chance of the portables going. Well, if they replaced them, then they wouldn't go into the sinkhole. And if the sinkhole did happen, they would have nothing on that exact spot. But at Tangerine Middle School, it was a 3-story building that, yes, it was old, but it separated all 3 grades, and they would all stay apart. So I'm thinking that Lake Windsor Middle School probably could have built a regular school like ours, but they didn't because they wanted to save money and some of it. And
I don't think it's about the money, because in the pink article they're the one about the educational inequality, the schools where they had like the richer families, like about the gated communities, they would receive a lot more money than the schools that had like minorities, like Tangerine Middle School. So I don't think it's about the money.
I actually disagree with you about the safeness, because I don't think that building a regular school would have made it any more safe. I feel like it would just destroy a bunch of the different hallways in the school, and if during a hall break a lot more kids would have been injured per area. So I think that the safeness wouldn't have been affected. It's where they built the houses and how Charlie Burns did not check all the areas that they were building the schools, and that was the main problem with the school.
I want to go back. I'm going to stop you guys. I want to go back to what Douglas kind of brought up. and talking about the educational inequalities within a school district, if you had that pink article, what else can you guys say to that?
There was also a little bit about race too, like how there's a lot of like more Spanish people like coming over from other places, and then they're not getting the same education as like people who are white or Asian and have like a lot more money, and also like how there's like there's like communities where it is mostly like more poverty areas and then more like different races.
And they were mostly talking about inner city New York
Yeah.
schools, right? And it was the difference between like, I don't know how up in New York neighborhoods you are, but we're talking Upper East Side or Upper West Side compared to, I think it was like, yeah, I mean, it was like the South, I don't know, Grace, you're probably looking for it right now. I don't
Yeah, I
remember.
was.
But, and I'm not that familiar with it either, but, you know, they're talking about how much money, Harlem, how much money is being siphoned into those rich areas versus the poor areas. And it's kind of a trend that it continues. Like, if you're not going to equal that money, there's never going to be anything but more class issue.
I guess they just think that since they're already living in poverty, then their parents were like that since they're living in poverty, so maybe they don't think that they have as good of a chance as the richer kids, that they have, well, I guess their parents are better examples, so they're trying to switch things
And
around.
that's probably why they don't really relate. Like how, when, I know Brian talked about it earlier, how the kids in Paul science class, how they had a typewriter and instead of the computer and the printer, and that's probably why they thought, they must think that richer people think they're better and they must, be like, ew.
I think
that's
rich
social
people class.
Allie, go ahead.
Okay, so another thing, Charlie Burns was probably like so in the rush to like start like a new middle school and a new like whole gated community that he couldn't, and to make money, that he couldn't really check out like the problems with it all, like the sinkhole and the termites.
I think that they built portables because they know there's a lot of rain there, and they probably watched that area fill up with rain, and they knew if they built a regular school, they might have water coming in to the building. Like our building's built a little to the ground, so they might have water damage and problems like that. So they just put wooden portables off the ground so they wouldn't have that problem.
I'd like to go back to what Elijah said. I think it was Elijah about people giving more money to schools that have richer kids because they don't have as good of a role model, and so. But what I'm thinking is that like more wealthy, richer kids just get stuff handed to them, but whereas poorer kids have to work for what they want. And so I think that poorer kids would actually work harder in school than.
Like if they don't have the same starting point, think of it like a race. Like if those kids don't have the same starting point, you're already telling like a disadvantaged child that they have to start behind the starting point. Do you know what I mean? Like when their school is not funded the same way, like don't you feel like it doesn't matter how hard you work if you don't have the same starting point?
Yeah.
If they had a better school.
Topic, the poor people, their parents have to work extra to make the extra money to be able to afford to go to school and to live in areas. So they don't have the time to go and help their kids start earlier with their basic math and reading and all that stuff. But if you're richer, you can, most of the times, not both the parents work or the grandparents are able to go and work with the kids, and so that gives them an advantage that some of the poor kids don't have.
I was wondering if we could talk about my article that I read, because it kind of connects with the minorities and people having to work harder, because it's about IEPs and how children with learning disabilities are unable to play some sports. And so it's kind of like they're starting farther back in school, so they have to have more help, so they're unable to participate in sports. And even if they are, the coaches are sometimes worse to them than other kids because they have an issue. And so I kind of wanted to talk about how do you think it's fair that if a child has an IEP that it should affect their ability to play sports?
This kind of
it's kind of it kind of goes back to one of the themes up on the board that's basically just life isn't fair. If it really just it kind of sort of has to do with probability on how you're born. Like just in the situation you're born in, like even the slightest disadvantage can just put you at a way lower level than someone else, being it wealth or just even an IEP. It can put you in a very just tough place in order to actually make it somewhere. Like even if you do have an IEP, you're still not going to be like when you have an IEP, you're not going to be treated fairly, even if you want to be. And even if you're poor, you're going to have the same disadvantage. And it's just
To Patrick's point about the children with IEP playing sports, it really depends on what theirs is. Like if with Paul, he could see with his glasses, but if it was something where their legs wouldn't work all the way, and it would be dangerous for them to play some sports. So it's a safety.
Well, I think most IEPs are actually about learning disabilities. I'm talking about like eligibility. Like most schools have like a 2.0 is like the eligibility grade that you have to have.
We saw that video.
Right. From watching that video about how most schools are raising them, but kids with IEPs like who have trouble like learning things with they have no short-term memory, are unable to keep up with these grades, and they can't play the sports that are basically their only way to get out of these places where their life isn't good.
I think what they're trying to do with the IEP and athletics is more so like focusing on academics, which I completely agree with. I mean, I really do not think like an IEP person like should be eligible like for sports unless they have like unless they do something like really well with their grades, because school is about like learning. It's not about playing sports. It's what like all those clubs and other outside school stuff are for. I mean, like schools are learning buildings, so they shouldn't like let people like I don't think it's right for them to allow someone to do athletics instead of focusing on the academics. And going back to the portables issue of Lake Windsor, I think it's more so like a reflection of their community. Like they have a gated community, so like keep things like, well, according to the article, like to keep things the same and like with unchanging, and it's almost like they're separating each grade to keep it the same within, to prevent problems and uncertainty. Like unlike Tangerine Middle, where they're all like squished together, like almost like all the other ungated communities. So it seems almost like a reflection.
This reminds me of okay, we're gonna stop there.